All right, let's get started. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Rahim Kaba, VP of Product Marketing at OneSpan, and I'm broadcasting from my home office here in Montreal, Canada, and really excited to be here today. I'll be spending the next 20 to 25 minutes talking about product marketing's path to the V-suite. Now, this isn't only about progressing to a VP level role. I recognize that growing your career as a product marketer is tough, and this session is all about how to move up wherever you are in your career path today, whether you're a PMM, a senior PMM, director level, or even higher. So without further ado, let's kick this off. So the agenda is pretty straightforward. I'll start off by discussing how we got here as a profession and how we've made huge progress in bringing clarity to the role of PMM. I'll discuss ways to demonstrate value and pave the path so that you can grow into your next product marketing role, whether that's at your current company or perhaps elsewhere. Then I'll talk about my personal journey and the lessons I learned along the way. I'm all about sharing experiences and learnings, and that's what I'll plan to do in this section of the webinar. And finally, we'll have some time for a live Q&A from the audience, and I definitely look forward to that. All right, so I wanted to start off by reviewing some research that the PMA conducted with executives about career mobility for PMM. What's really interesting here is that execs were divided on the question of where product marketers will advance in the future. Basically, the jury is still out on career progression of product marketing in the long term. Many said that product marketing is a generalist function that acts as a general manager of the product. And as a result, it kind of lends itself to a broader leadership function in the future, whether that's in the C-suite or the V-suite. And in the end, your career progression will likely depend on the organization and the politics within it. But the initial insights from this study are really promising for PMMs. Now, we've all seen or maybe even used this type of diagram to explain what PMM is to our peers, that we sit at the junction between marketing, sales, and product, and of course, where PMM is at the center of all things. We always like to think that. If you tried explaining it this way, it probably resulted in a bunch of people scratching their heads, trying to figure out what that really meant. And that's no fault of your peers, to be honest, because they were likely never exposed to or never worked with product marketing and just don't know where we fit in the org and ultimately how we deliver value. They've likely seen similar PMM responsibilities delegated to content marketers, marketing strategists, and even product managers. And that's part of the problem. So product marketing is often different at different companies. And depending on your organization and geography, product marketing may be a relatively new profession. It's certainly newer than other more established functions, such as product management, for example. You might have worked at companies where the role was more mature and well defined, and others where the scope was ambiguous and sometimes objectives and goals for the role weren't, clearly set out. The good news is that this is changing as we speak, and we're starting to see a level of standardization in our profession that we haven't seen in years past. This step towards standardization is a huge benefit to organizations that are investing in PMM, and also gives companies that may be closer to the left side of the spectrum visibility into how and where PMM can deliver value and impact the bottom line. Now, let's just rewind the clock a little bit to see how we got here today as a profession. If you're in the tech sector, you know all about Gartner's famous hype cycle, so I thought I'd use it as an analogy here for the journey we've been on for the last several years. So if we start on the left, there was probably some point in time where someone in your org said, hey, we need product marketing, go hire someone, which is great because this means the organization has grown to a size that can justify a PMM headcount, and the company is really serious about having a more structured approach to go to market. Then after PMM is brought on board, they're likely handed a mishmash of projects that no one really wanted to begin with, and that product marketer is also being asked to drive all the types of product launches that are coming up in the cycle, but without a lot of context on how that product came to be, who the buyer is, what problems we're trying to solve with the product, and so on and so forth. We all know this story. The result, if you follow this curve, is disappointment in the end, and everyone really asking themselves what happened and why aren't we seeing the results that we set out to see. The good news is that over time, the role of PMM has matured, and with the help of organizations like the PMA, others like Pragmatic Marketing, as a profession, we've really been given the tools needed to be successful. And this is, this involves getting exposed to customers and having a true understanding of the market and buyers. So being on this slope of enlightenment, if you will, is really a great place to be for our profession. It showcases that PMM has really come a long way in the last decade or so. And just for the record, unlike that cryptic Venn diagram that many of us probably have used in the past, this is my definition of product marketing. You've likely seen variations of this. I've just kind of tweaked it a little bit, but the way that I define it is that we are the glue that binds our product strategy to the tactics we need to drive sales and marketing success. And in all honesty, I think a lot of the confusion in the past in our profession stems from the word product being in our titles. I know that's a little bizarre, but I think every PMM should know their product very well. That's a given. But we aren't really supposed to be product experts per se. I think there's this misconception out there that, oh, you're a product marketing person, you should be a product expert. And yeah, we definitely need to know our product. But the way that I see this is, and the way that I explain this to my peers and others in my network, is that we are experts in 3 very specific areas. Number 1, we're the experts on our buyers. We need to know who they are, what their key pain points are, and how they find, try, and buy our solutions. Number 2, we have to be experts on the competition. We need to know who they are and what they do today and what they plan to do in the future. And then number 3, taking our knowledge of the market, buyers, and competition, and really crafting compelling, differentiated value propositions to empower both sales and marketing teams. So that's really important for me, and that's the way that I typically describe who we are and what we do. So now that we're kind of on this path to clarity, which is great for our profession, and we're more indexed on the right side of the spectrum that I showed earlier, where the role is starting to get better defined and better understood in the organization, what's the next wave? What's the next big thing that we need to do to advance the profession and our individual career paths with respect to our respective organizations? In other words, how can we demonstrate value and ROI to the leaders in our organizations that are responsible for structuring departments and functions within the organization? And that's a big part of what I'm going to be talking about next. I'd like to highlight 3 areas that may help you demonstrate value and pave the path to the next level in your organization. None of these are revolutionary ideas, but when executed together, I think can really enable you to elevate product marketing in your organization, and as a byproduct, elevate how you're perceived by leaders in the organization. So the first one, my first piece of advice here is understand what your organization needs. There are likely a number of areas where your organization consistently falls short. Maybe it's how you bring a solution to market. Maybe it's earlier in the product lifecycle when you need to determine the personas and the use cases you're going after. Whatever those set of challenges are, there's likely a gap that no one is filling in right now. And don't get me wrong, product marketing can't and shouldn't fix every problem in the organization, but if it's an area that PMM can and should directly impact, it's important to acknowledge that it's a gap and start building a plan on how to effectively fill it. Number two is execute, execute, execute. You're going to hear this actually a couple of times in this presentation. If you're trying to position yourself for that next stage in your PMM career, leaders in your org need to see that you can not only develop plans and strategies, but that you're able to bring people together, gain consensus, and execute on those plans. This is even more important in organizations that are more top heavy, that need people that have skills to execute. This is so critical in PMM, in my opinion, whether you're a director level or VP level or even higher than that. You need to be able to get things done. When I personally hire for a director level or even PMM level, this is a must-have for me. Product marketing is a core go-to-market function that requires both strategy and tactics to move the dial. So if you're strong in one area and not the other, I recommend you spending time to beef up your skills in that area. The third area is track, measure, and optimize. And this one's a little bit tricky. It's really hard to measure the impact of product marketing. I personally struggled with this, and there's no perfect formula or KPI that will work for all organizations. This kind of goes back to my first point about understanding your organization's needs. If your company is struggling to increase its win rate, for example, then figure out ways to demonstrate value by improving the win rate in your organization. I know that sounds straightforward, but I get it. You know, growing your career as a PMM is tough. There are likely a bunch of circumstances that are unique to you and unique to your organization. And to be honest, and I want to be straightforward here, there may not be an optimal path at your current organization. That's something that you'll need to assess and determine if that next jump in your career is with another organization. The last segment of my presentation is sharing my personal journey with you and the lessons I've learned along the way. Just note though that every journey will be different. My journey and the path and decisions I took may not work for you and your specific situation. The goal here is to share my learnings in hopes that there may be things here that inspire you or things that you may want to try and see if they work in your context and in your situation. So if you're early in your career, it's important to note that no career path will be perfectly linear and no path will be exactly the same for different people. Most people jump around in their careers. Some start in marketing while others come from other functions like product and sales. We advance in our careers, we retract, we go in tangents, right? There's a whole slew of things that happen during your career path. There's a whole host of reasons why things happen the way they are. And for myself, I started my career about 20 years ago, not knowing exactly what I wanted to do. And to be honest, I owe a lot of where I've landed today to luck. I think a lot of people will probably say that as well. The university I attended here in Canada had an internship program tied to it. Essentially, it was a 5-year bachelor's degree program where I accumulated close to 2 years of paid work experience. It was really a fantastic opportunity to try out a bunch of things before committing to that first stage of my career. When I look back at the 2 most memorable internships that I had, they were both marketing related. And at the time, these positions were called marketing writer and technical marketing specialist. I did things like write product briefs and write data sheets. I did competitive analyses and I built sales decks. And today, if those positions existed today, they would probably be under the PMM umbrella and called something differently today. I knew though I liked all things product related, so I decided to continue down this path. I eventually became a project manager for a technology company, then a product manager for a short stint, and quickly realized that product marketing was more aligned with my skill set. I simply enjoyed the external go-to-market side of the business and working more with sales and marketing versus defining the product and getting it built behind the scenes. But I owe most of my career progression to OneSpan, which is my current employer. We're a SaaS company that delivers digital identity and anti-fraud solutions. And that's where finding the right employer is so key in this journey, in your journey in particular. There will be circumstances and opportunities that arise in some companies, but not all. So it's important for you that when you go down this path, and if moving up in your career is something that's important to you, you'll want to ensure that the organization that you're working for is willing to and able to help you get to that next level in your career. And if not, well, you have to have that honest conversation with yourself and determine if you need to find an organization that may be better suited to the journey that you're on. When I joined the company in 2014, we were a VC-backed startup at the time, and then eventually got acquired by OneSpan. So we were a smaller company, got acquired many years down the road. Product marketing, when we were a startup, was a new function. I had the opportunity to help define what that looked like. I was the first PMM hire for the company. I loved it. I had a blank canvas and earned the right to develop what that function really looked like, and how that looks like even today. If we go back to how I demonstrated value, is kind of going back to the tips that I provided earlier. The gaps in the organization at the time was all around improving sales productivity and sales win rates. So I set a path for myself that included attending as many sales calls as I could to understand the objections that the sales team faced and the traps that were laid by competitors. And as a result, I decided to develop a sales enablement program to ensure that the sales team had the tools and the knowledge of the market and buyers to be successful. I eventually got budget to hire additional PMMs because the team was more successful. Productivity rates were up, win rates were up as well. And then that moved me into a director level role for my particular product portfolio. In later years after the acquisition, and as a larger organization with a multi-tiered product management and product marketing orgs, there was naturally challenges that we faced as we continued to grow as an organization. And that then helped me demonstrate the value of having a VP level PMM role in the organization. But this wasn't an overnight journey. It took a couple of years to prove my value, to showcase that I could scale this function consistently across the organization. And there's still a lot of work to do even today. One of the ways that I demonstrated value to get to this role was through an understanding of the gaps in the organization. And I pinpointed two specific areas that I wanted to address and elevate to the senior leadership team. Number one was there was an ongoing confusion between product management and product marketing. That probably sounds familiar to many of you on this webinar. And it was something that I was determined to bring clarity on. Number two, there was inconsistency in how we were going to market across product lines, and I saw that as an opportunity to standardize the PMM function across the organization. So I set out to work with my director level counterparts at the time in PM and PMM to better define roles and responsibilities. I recommended a RACI approach, and we spent a full day mapping out all of the responsibilities and assigned owners, where there was clashing, where there was blurring of lines. And by the way, this is by no means a be all and end all representation of how PM and PMM should work together, but the approach works for our organization and something that we've adopted and continually improve on. This was also a great way to help standardize how PMMs across the org operated. It was something that got noticed by our executive team. They saw PMM as a critical go-to-market function. And this eventually helped me make the case for the VP level role in product marketing that oversaw all PMM functions across the org to ensure that consistency in how we go to market. Again, this isn't a recipe that will work for all companies, and I encourage you to really pinpoint the areas where your organization needs the most help. So what's your career path look like here? I think the opportunities are endless for product marketing. You might excuse me, you might be on a have a path in mind that looks something like this, moving from PMM to director level to VP level, and maybe finally a CMO role. Who knows? I mean, there's a lot of opportunities out there, but the path in reality might look very different. One of my perspectives and mottos that I think about a lot is every day is a school day, and it's important to learn, have an open mind, and understand what truly excites you. So, for example, you might not really like managing people, and you might see yourself more as a doer, and that's totally fine. Don't force yourself into a box or predetermined path. Figure out what makes you happy, what challenges you, and whether that path really fits your lifestyle as well. So many different opportunities, so many different paths. No one specific path is the right path. But I think product marketing has a lot to give. I think there's a lot of different opportunities in the organization, depending on your interests and how your product, your organization is structured. Having said that, if you have a goal in sight, go for it. My journey took years of hard work, but also years of good luck, as I mentioned before. So just to end off my presentation here, I wanted to share some final thoughts on what helped me get to where I am today. Number one, I always recommend saying yes to stretch projects, especially projects that, again, address those gaps in your organization. Challenge yourself, take on responsibility. You might not always have the answers or might not always be ready to take on that additional responsibility, but go figure it out and learn. For example, if you have the opportunity to take on bigger, broader launches, if that's available, go for it. Learn about other product lines in your organization. Take the opportunity to learn about the business and growth areas in your business and so on. Number two, share learnings and how and why they impacted your decisions. As I said before, every day is a school day. Learn, gather insights from the market, and use those insights to make well-informed decisions. Number three, execute. I told you I'd come back to that one. As PMMs, we're often in the driver's seat, and it's our responsibility as PMMs to bring momentum to any project that we lead. So really get good at executing, and you'll draw lots of attention in your organization. And lastly, and I think often we forget or underestimate this one, is but make your boss successful. Anything that you can do to make your boss shine will definitely go a long way in how you're perceived in your organization. All right, so just a final word here to close off my presentation. I think the outlook for PMM as a profession is excellent. We are truly architects of growth in our respective organizations, and it's so core and so fundamental to the business. I'll even go on the record to say that I think it's one of the most exciting and critically important functions in business today. And that's because organizations, as we all know, continue to invest their money in building great products. That's what defines a lot of businesses, and building products that are competitive in the marketplace. But if you don't know who your buyers are, if you don't know how they make decisions, and if you don't know what matters to those buyers, all of the investment that a business puts upfront in R&D and engineering, in my opinion, really goes down the drain. So this is why it's such a critical function. And I wish you all the best in how you progress in your careers. I hope that you're challenged. So I'm going to end it off there. I'm going to thank everyone for their time and attention. I really appreciate it. And we'll be able to move on to Q&A now. Thank you.
Hi everyone, thank you very much for tuning in, and thank you to Rahim for a great talk. He is going to join us momentarily to go through the questions that have been asked in the chat.
so much, and thanks everyone for joining today. I was scanning through some of the questions as this went along, so we'll tackle them. The first thing I wanted to do first is let's go through the poll. It was really interesting for me, at least, to determine like who is on this call, what level is in terms of your titles, where are you in your careers. Just looking at the results of the poll, it looks like the majority of you are product marketing managers. So probably a little bit earlier in your careers. There are definitely a bunch of folks here at a director or head of product marketing level. So just gives me a good feel for the levels of this audience, which is fantastic. So great that you're all attending this webinar to understand what the growth looks like in that trajectory. So thank you for answering that poll. All right, so let's go through these questions. Actually, there's some comments as well, so let me just go through the first one here. Roger says, only a true PMM would include a Gartner hype cycle to define their career. Yeah, I kind of geeked out on that one. A lot of us use Gartner, Forrester, and other analysts as references. I thought that was an interesting one. So yes, definitely geeked out. Suchita says, do engineers become better product marketers? It's a really good question. I've definitely encountered product marketers that have come from various backgrounds. Myself, as you saw in my journey, I come from a pure marketing background. I did my undergrad. Actually, I did a double degree in science and business, and then I went on to do my MBA about a decade later. So I do have more of a marketing background. The way that I would approach this is that there's no excuse me, a right or wrong answer to this one. I think engineers could be very well positioned to be product marketers. There's definitely more of there's two sides of the equation. There's more of the analytical and technical side of product marketing, and then there's the whole creative side of the spectrum, because you are developing messaging, positioning, value propositions, and so on. So if the engineer is over-indexed on the technical side, they'll definitely need to beef up their skills on the creative side, be able to translate some of those product concepts, technical product concepts, into how people can leverage them in the marketplace. How is it solving pain points in the market and so on? So that could be a little bit of a switch. Also, engineers typically focus on building products for users of products, whereas on the product marketing side, we're focused on buyers of products. So again, there's a little bit of a switch in how you think through your job as a product marketer versus an engineer. And if you're able to make that transition between focusing on users and more so on focusing on the buyers, I think there's definitely opportunities to make that switch if that's something an engineer wanted to do. So I wouldn't exclude engineers at all. If I'm hiring, for example, I definitely look at engineers on resumes that I come across. It's really all about skill set, interests, and are they able to make that switch from my perspective. So yeah, I saw a bunch of people here chime in about that question in particular. There's folks that said it's not mandatory. They don't necessarily, potentially, they don't empathize with the customer, which is possible. But again, they may have just been over-indexed on the user side versus the buyer and customer side. So again, if somebody is engineering that wants to get exposure to product marketing, I would absolutely recommend getting exposure to the customer and buyer side of the fence. That might mean tag teaming with sales a little bit more closely as well, because that is the first entry point into getting exposure to prospects and customers. So that is definitely a good first step. Roger asks, what are good KPIs people have used for PMM? Is there anything that is completely under the PMM control? I love this question, and as I mentioned in my presentation, this is probably the most difficult things for product marketing, to showcase value, to demonstrate ROI from our positions, because sometimes it can be very intangible what we're doing. Like I said, I don't think there's a one size-fits-all KPI for all product marketers. What I found interesting for us, and something that I've been trying to focus on a little bit more and more at OneSpan, is all about two angles here. There is the external customer side, and then there's an internal customer side. When I think about the external customer side, this is all about how fast are leads moving through sales funnels? How do you qualify the bad ones out, and how do you close the more relevant ones faster, right? So if we think about sales productivity and how product marketing can help support those sales teams, making sure that they're not constantly trying to figure out how to answer questions, how to understand use cases, how to position the product, and so on and so forth. The more that we can enable them, the more productive they are, the less they have to rely on individual people to get the answers they need. So I think understanding that is going to be really important, and that also goes back to the internal teams, so the salespeople themselves, and how they are effective in their day-to-day. And this goes along the lines of all the enablement that we do in our profession to make sure that they are productive. And at the end of the day, it's really about helping them improve their win rates. The less time they're struggling, the less time that they're trying to figure out things for themselves, the better that they can be. So I think there's two areas there. There's one on, like I said, the enablement side, and how are they leveraging the tools that we're creating and helping them position and pitch the solutions in the marketplace. And number two is the velocity of those leads in the funnel. I know there's a direct link there to demand generation and lead generation, but I think we should be partnering with our marketing colleagues there to understand the impact we are having on the velocity of those leads in the sales cycle. All right, so more dialogue here that I'm not going to read through. I'm sure many of you have gotten through some of these comments already. So there's a question from Sean that says, which roles do you think transfer best to a career in product marketing? I think this goes kind of back to the first question. I know that was explicitly for engineers. Do I think there's particular roles that transfer best? I don't think so, to be honest. Like I said, I've seen roles from marketing, from sales, from product move on to product marketing roles. I don't think there's a one size fits all or one best function that can move on to product marketing. Like I said, I think there's two elements here. So there's the creative versus the technical analytical side, and I think you need both of those. And then going back to that definition of product marketing that I showcased in my presentation, you have to have a strategy, but you also have to have the tactics and execution. So you have to be a master of both of those, in my opinion. And if you have experienced that in the past, I think you can easily move into a product marketing role. I've also seen folks move from project management into product marketing as well. A lot of what we do, if you think about our roles in a product launch or go-to-market plan, a lot of that can become very tactical. And how are we moving the different pieces, and how are we enabling the right people, and how are we getting consensus from the different groups, and how are we bringing them all together to come to certain decisions? That is fundamentally a project management capability, and I've seen project managers actually do quite well in a product marketing function. So it depends. I mean, like many of the answers I've been giving here, but I think if you've got those basic skill sets that I talked about, I think transferability into product marketing is absolutely possible. Roger has a question here. Are any thoughts on when the term product marketing came to be? Like Raheem, I started doing the function before the term really existed, to my knowledge, 10 years. Yeah, that's a good question. I think, I don't know, maybe Brianna, you've got some thoughts on this one in particular. But in my personal journey, as I said, probably when was my first product marketing title? I think it was 2010. So we're looking at about 10 years. So Roger, I think maybe your prediction there is probably about right. I think it depends on the geography as well. I'm not going to make a blanket statement here, but I think in general, North America, the product marketing function is probably a little bit more mature than we have seen in other parts of the world. So we might have seen product marketing in titles a decade ago in Canada and North America, and maybe those titles didn't really exist in other parts of the world. Or maybe they did exist, but maybe they didn't mean exactly what they mean today. So it's probably more of a history lesson, and we should probably put a line in the sand there when that title actually became a reality. I don't know, Brianna, do you have any thoughts on that one?
I'd say be sure to check out the State of Product Marketing Report 2020, as well as the one we released last year, and you'll be able to see statistics of how the role has grown, evolved, where the term is being used, where the titles are being used. and similar titles that are cropping up in sort of job posts and that sort of thing. But in terms of how far it goes back, I think you guys are pretty much on the money.
Awesome. All right, let's go through these a little bit more. Can I get a copy of the slides? Of course you can. Brianni, I don't know if we're making these available, but
sure, I can make that. If you just find us on LinkedIn, I'll be happy to send over a copy.
All right, Christine asks, when is an org ready to hire a VP of product marketing? I love this question as well. I asked this question to myself probably for the last 5 years. It's an interesting one. I think it depends. You're gonna love that for me. Smaller organizations. So if we think about companies sub 100, you might only see a product marketing manager only enter into an organization when they're in the 60, 70, 80, 100 people range, right? At least that's my experience. When they're really, really small, startups, for example, of 10, 20, 30, 40 people, you'll typically see a product manager wear both hats, if you will, or maybe somebody in the marketing department or an early marketing department at that stage take some of the pieces of product marketing. I think when you start to mature, obviously, in my case at least, I was able to start building out a team after we got past that 100-person mark. I grew myself into a director level role, and then once we got acquired, and our company today is somewhere along the lines of 700, 800 people at this point, we were really able to justify having a VP level role. There's a lot of different circumstances here that are going to be at play. Is there a VP of product management existing at that organization? And if so, I think there is an opportunity to have a counterpart for product marketing at that level. Otherwise, you're going to have a bunch of directors of product marketing interface with that VP of product management, and it just becomes a little bit more challenging. So I think once you've got a VP of product management, that is a good indicator that potentially you might have a path to having, or at least justifying, a headcount for a VP of PMM. So I don't have a direct answer in terms of the size of the company. I think it's going to depend on the growth of the company. How successful have you been in the product marketing function today? Is it really well understood? And going back to my presentation, have you been able to demonstrate value? Because if you're not able to demonstrate value, senior leadership will not put any investment or money or headcount into having a VP of PMM until that has come into play. Tanya asks, what kind of technical skills would you recommend leveling up a PMM? I've done a bit of coding and some Google Analytics. What else would you say is worth investing in? This is a really good question. I think from a professional development perspective, it's definitely something we should all be considering. In my organization in particular, I think it's important on many levels. I like the angle around coding and understanding APIs, because if your organization is selling solutions like SDKs, APIs that are integrated into larger applications, I think a baseline in computer science and coding is really going to be necessary. If you're working for a company that is an AI company or AI-based company, you're going to want to have some baseline understanding in machine learning and AI technologies. If you're an organization that is very vertical specific and sell into specific industries like financial services, which is the case for OneSpan, we focus very much on banking, insurance, government, and healthcare. So a lot of regulated industries. It's not necessarily a technical skill, but I think it's important to understand those industries. I always try to hire as well people that have industry backgrounds, so whether that they worked in a bank or an insurance company, or have worked in a product marketing role or other role that has sold into those industries. It's also going to be really important, because ramping up as a product marketer and selling to a particular industry and the use cases and business processes within that industry, it becomes a very steep learning curve. So I think there's different angles here when we talk about technical skills. From my opinion, I think you definitely want to look at the technology side of it. What is the foundational technology that your company is selling? Is it an API? Is it a workflow engine? and you might want to have the technical skills tied to that. And then there's also the industry vertical side as well, which is, are you selling into particular industries? If so, maybe ramping up. And there's a whole bunch of industry courses out there that you could sign up for to just kind of ramp up your skills in the markets you're selling into. And if you're entering into new industries as well, so if your company decides tomorrow, hey, we're going to get into the oil and gas industry or utilities or telco industry, there's going to be some interesting things that you're going to want to also ramp up on. I've always leveraged industry analysts like Gartner, Forrester, et cetera, to support kind of ramping up on that. So they've got a number of really, really great reports, obviously, but also having those discussions with those analysts to make sure you understand who are those buyers, what are their particular pain points in those particular industries. Do they translate nicely from your traditional industries that you have focused on? So that is also a really important consideration, especially if your organization is very vertically focused. All right. Sad here says, you mentioned you have a science background. How did you make the decision to transition to a business side? I made the same transition right after graduation, so I'm curious your thought process in making that decision. That's a good one. So it was a lot easier for me, to be honest, because I did a double degree in science and business. So half of my courses were in biology and chemistry, and the other half were in finance and marketing and so on. And because I had an internship program tied to my program, and I didn't mention this in my journey, I probably should have put a dotted line to that first job that I had. My first job was an internship as a cell biology specialist. So I actually was playing with DNA in a lab in a hospital in Toronto. I did that for 2 work terms and decided absolutely no way was that something I wanted to do in the long term, stand behind a bench and go on to do my PhD in biochemistry to go down that path, which was a really nice eye opener because I think I wanted to keep my options open, but I loved science when I was in high school, but just realized that wasn't something I wanted to do in the long term. What was interesting, where my switch came into play, and again, this was very specific to me, was my work term, my internship right after that was at a chemistry software company based in Toronto. And they're called ACD Labs, and they're still around, great company. And the job there was a technical writer. And so I did get some exposure to the business side. I worked a lot with customer support because a lot of the documentation I was writing was for customers. But what was nice about that was it led to my future role, which was on the journey curve that I showed, which was the technical marketing specialist. I did a second work term at that company, and that's how I kind of got introduced to the marketing side of the fence. And again, that was very much a product marketing role if I think back to it, because I was doing competitive analyses. I was producing video content and things like that. So a really nice transition for me from the pure science world to a science and business role. And then I moved into technology completely right after that, which was something that was interesting for me. All right. I don't know if we've got any other questions here. Can I get a copy of the slides, which we answered? Yeah, I think we've answered everything here. So
there's one from Christine.
Hold on, let me see here. Sorry about that. Maybe I missed it. Christine, there we go. What are ways to consistently be at the revenue table? Interesting. Okay, so I think when you mean revenue table, how do you get at the table where all the senior leaders are, senior managers, et cetera, and maybe more on the sales side as well? This is a good question. I think it goes back to that first point around demonstrating value, right? How are you adding value to generating revenue inside of the organization? And one of the KPIs that I talked about earlier, which is how are we helping the velocity of leads that go through a sales funnel? If we are contributing to that, if we are contributing to how our sales team gets enabled, how they're pitching our solution in the marketplace, we should have a seat at that table. And just to be very clear, you don't need to be a VP of product marketing to have a seat at that table. I think you can effectively do that, and I did that even when I was a sole product marketing manager. And in a smaller company, and having that seat at the table to illustrate the value and demonstrate the value that I can contribute to those conversations, and talk about ways in which we can streamline processes, how we can better enable the sales team, how we can better strategize on marketing campaigns that are going to impact the bottom line. So title really shouldn't matter here. But I think you're going to have some quick wins internally first. Make sure that you are showcasing value. This is not something that you'll get day one in your job, of course. So work with your manager, I would say. Illustrate your interest in getting exposure to some of those conversations, and then earn your right to that. It's not going to happen overnight. You have to gain the trust of your manager and the salespeople around you. If you can get that, I think that is a nice stepping stone to getting invited to that revenue table that you talked about, Christine. All right, I think that was the last one.
Yeah, I think we've covered it all. Well, you've covered it all, and a great job at doing that. Thank you very much for the presentation and for being here for live Q&A as well. I think the audience really enjoyed it. A lot of engagement going on. Do follow us on LinkedIn as well to carry on the conversation. And yeah, we'll get slides over to people if they want them, and there will be a recording available of this shortly after we go off air. So thank you very much for being here again.
Thanks for having me. Take care. Have a great day.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.